I just, again, it's all old technology now, right? Hey, do you guys have any, remapped computers for a 40 plus year old BMW lying around? No? Oh, that's weird.
How did these become 40-year-old cars?
How did any of these become 40-year-old? Yeah, it's there's two parts to this, and we should talk about this because we haven't talked about it in a while. Full disclosure, Reed and I have talked about this, but it's been a minute. Like all the cars we like are properly old now, even though we don't think they're properly old. What does that mean? Right? Well, we're talking about Reed 633. What year is that thing? 83, 84,
84.
84, right? That
It's a
is a
42-year-old car.
40. Thank you for doing the math. I figure between us, one
Yeah.
of us can do it. Um, um, that's a 42-year-old car, but it doesn't really look and feel like a 42-year-old car because we remember when these cars were current. Not
That was the car they
it's
drove on
true, but
moonlighting. I
well,
mean,
not just on moonlighting, but
1 year newer or whatever. But
yeah, I mean a bit newer, but not, I think we've talked about this before. My 530 is now a 24-year-old car.
well,
How
the mystery car that I'm not going to release today is um, it's a
25?
25-year-old car. I know that because it just meets the cutoff for antique plates here in Virginia and no emissions, what have you. And in my head, A, it's a contemporary car. B, I'm looking at it as a partial daily driver, but it's in that sweet spot.
Right,
In my head,
right.
you know, we had a similar. I've had a couple of similar cars to this one that I'm getting, right? In my head, it's still a newish car. Never mind, it's the same age as my older daughter who lives in New Jersey and works for a living. You know,
Right, right. Well, right. And I live in a place where the weather can kill you.
Mm.
Case in point, we came out of Mark and Sherry's house last night and it was -4. And yes, we were driving the Subaru, but I didn't know Subaru seats could get that hard when it's -4 out. The coffee we left in the car was frozen rock solid. Wasn't even slushy, it was rock solid.
Uh,
So if you don't have a car that can get you home, non-zero chance you could die. And yet my daily driver, such as I go out, is a 24-year-old 5 Series, which to your point and to the point we've made before is I feel like that's not an old car, except guess what?
well, and the carry on from that is when we were young car enthusiasts in the mid late 1980s, right? When we were coming up, we started driving, what have you. A 40-year-old car in 1987 was a 1947.
It was just post-war, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
a lot of those cars, well, by the late 40s, they were starting to have new designs, but mid 40s, like coming straight out of World War II.
oh
We can't even say the war anymore, right? Because
yeah.
the
Yeah,
young
which one?
don't know which war that
Right,
is,
right, right.
right? Um, but coming right out of World War II, all those cars were pre-World War II design, so they
Yeah.
were even older.
Right, right. Yeah, they were all like 1937 designs and stuff. I mean,
Right,
stuff like
right.
that.
And it's so funny because nowadays, we're talking about, we just call it 25-year-old BMWs or Mercedes or Jaguars or
Yeah, any of the
to a degree
above.
Audi,
Yeah.
or shit, Range Rovers, right?
Shh, don't say the R word.
Right. Um, and we love those cars. We drive those cars. That's sort of our sweet spot where for the majority of the cars we like, not all, but for the majority, that's sort of where the sweet spot ends, in the mid to late aughts.
Yeah,
When our parents were our age, right?
coming up on
Mid
yeah, yeah. A
50s.
little bit older than us, but not much. Yeah.
Well, right, but our parents were not pining for 25-year-old cars,
Nope.
right?
But
So
part of
let me
that's
do the
also
math real
our
quick. 53, dad's 30 years older, so 30 years ago was 96, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
96.
So a
My
year
father
before your
was not
Z3 was
pining.
new.
My father was not pining for late 60s, early 70s cars. I mean, he loved his 67 and a half Datsun, but he wasn't like, man, you know what I really want?
Right.
And a 71 Rambler.
And he didn't buy it as a daily driver.
Right. Sure as heck sure didn't buy it as a daily driver.
But the
Right.
part of it is, I mean, they're better cars than those were. I mean, the 70s was
Absolutely.
bad for just about everybody in one way or another. I mean, yes, there were some better cars, some worse cars, but it would be like that would be like your dad daily driving your old Bavaria,
Right.
which he wouldn't have done because you get out of those cars, you smell like exhaust or gasoline. I
Right.
mean, things like that. I mean, the technology of the early aughts cars or the late 90s or mid late 90s cars or even late 80s cars with fuel injection and all that made them just at a high level better cars. And they don't cross that line that sort of happened somewhere in the late aughts or early teens or whatever, where just everything is a computer screen and when these things fail and you don't have a warranty, either you're throwing the car away or you're taking out a second mortgage on your house to fix it.
Right. Right.
uh,
And a lot of these cars that we're talking about that are 25 years old, again, using that sort of generically, many of the ones that we're interested in, there's an enthusiast base for
mm,
because they are fixable. Yes, they're interesting cars, but even the less interesting versions of those cars, like we like, Jag X300, X308, X350,
mm,
XJRs. But a lot of the knowledge base for keeping those cars on the road, the interesting versions, trickles down to, just a generic eight cylinder,
yeah,
right? Or, E39 M5s, 540, 530 Sports, like that knowledge trickles down to keeping a 525 automatic wagon on the road.
mm,
Whereas nowadays, cars that are even interesting cars today, um, that are sold today, I don't know that that technology in 15, 20 years is going to exist to keep those cars on the road.
yeah,
Conversation I had with my buddy Mark a few weeks ago, a few months ago, who knows? Um, he's got a 2018 X5, nice car.
mm,
But right now it is supported by BMW, supported by the dealer. He can go in and have things done with their computer. What happens in 20 years?
mm-hmm,
Mark made the comment, well, hopefully the nerds are going to figure it out and they'll be able to like get into the systems and program it and this and that. And subsequently, I thought, yeah, but nobody's going to care. Like
yeah.
nobody's going to care about in 20 years, nobody's going to care about keeping a 2018 X5 on the road. Nobody. The cars are just,
It'll be a disposable car.
it's a disposable car.
I mean, this is, so we bought the 2025 Mercedes wagon, and everything is a screen in that car. I mean, it's everything. The seat massagers, because my wife has seat massagers and loves her seat massagers. That's all that's controlled through a screen, through motors and bladders and things in the seats. And just based on my experience with cars that are fixable, my old 500 SEC had, bladders in the seats and you could replace them and then your seats worked again. These cars, once that's 5 years out of production, are any of those things still going to be available? Because the automakers have sort of shifted from that philosophy of keeping parts in stock to keep the cars going forever, and we have every part. You could build, a whole car from the parts inventory to we keep what's absolutely necessary. They tend to keep mechanical stuff like seals and, things like that. But what's going to happen with all of these complex electrical systems, computers, controllers, and the parts they control? The automakers, because their ranges, Mercedes went from having 3 car ranges and 1 truck range to I don't even know how many there are now. 16. I don't, whatever.
Whatever the
They
number.
can't. I mean, they can't afford. Even large companies can't afford to keep all the parts for all those cars in stock, especially since they're not all common, right? I mean, that was the other thing. With a 123 and a 126, there was a lot of crossover in some of the parts. Yeah, not all of them, and certainly not trim and stuff like that. But even some of like the seat stuff and things like that were common. And with all these automakers and all these different model ranges and everything, I'm looking at the car across the way there. That's why I'm looking there. I just, like that car when it's out of warranty, and a couple years after that, when you start getting NLA every time you look for a part,
Mhm.
you know, you sell it for what you can get for it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, eventually, after the third or fourth owner, all these cars just get recycled, right?
Yeah.
And to some degree, or probably not some degree, to a large degree, that's by design.
Oh, yeah.
A, because recycling, I guess, um, but B, because Mercedes and a lot of these manufacturers figured out you can't make money, you can't grow if your cars last eternally. So
Right.
guess what? We just make
Right.
them recyclable.
Yeah, and that's what, you always sort of laugh when you hear these guys, well, they should make the 123 diesels again. Well, I mean, they wouldn't even come close to passing any modern, safety standard.
Right.
But they won't do it for the obvious reason that if they sell that car, then they won't sell, all these new things, other than to the people that want the latest and greatest, technology. And there's a lot of those people out there. I'm not one of those people that has to have the latest and greatest technology. Every time I get in that E450 wagon, I have to wipe off the screen
Mhm.
because it's covered in fingerprints and it drives me insane.
Mhm.
And because that's where you control everything. That's my aesthetic, OCD. It's like I've got to clean it. I don't want to get it every time I get in a car, I have to clean a screen.
Mhm.
I want to push a button. And if that button's a little dirty, doesn't phase me.
Right.
But if the screen's got thumbprints all over it or whatever, bonkers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I,
so that, yeah, I
I
mean, that
think.
sweet spot thing is sort of it's an interesting thing because, and again, 25-year-old cars, love them. I mean,
Yeah.
and I could say that for a lot of cars that, like I said, the car that I've bought is a 25-year-old car and will look familiar to some people. Other 25, I mean, this SL here is probably as new as I want to get in an SL. And even this one's a little questionable with the ABC suspension,
Mm.
hydraulics that nature doesn't care for or the universe doesn't care for. The parts are still available, thankfully.
Sitting next to the Range Rover with the suspension that nature doesn't care for.
Although, knock on wood,
Ooh, don't say it. Just stop. Just stop. Hey, that's a
smooth
really interesting drop light
as
in your background. Let's talk about the drop light.
smooth as silk. I drove my wife to the airport yesterday morning at dumb o'clock. Took that car. Just such a sweet driver, such a sweet driver, and no warning lights in that hour. So,
I, I, I,
oh,
I'm
I'm
not.
I'm I'm
I'm not
tempting
listening. I'm not listening.
I'm tempting the gods. It's funny because on the table behind my desk here that has the computer on it, I'm looking at the Range Rover 2002-2005 model year workshop manual.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
my bedtime reading.
yeah. I was going to say, rivaling in breadth only the Encyclopedia Britannica.
But here's the thing: I'm not afraid to tackle things in that car or to have them tackled because again, they're known. I mean, the people that specialize in them because they have a fan base, and as my new mechanic, relatively new mechanic, has said, the reason he's in business is because people are absolutely fanatical about loving their silly old Range Rovers, and I'm falling into that trap because I really like this car, and yeah, they fail in interesting and sometimes spectacular ways. Yeah, I was watching a Demuro video the other day where they were talking about a cars and bids thing where they were talking about which Range Rovers were the best, and the number one I think they came up with was the original, the classic, and number two was the L322, and then he sort of went sideways saying except for the 2003 2005s because that was the car that basically made him famous in a lot of
Right,
ways.
right.
And he's like, yeah, he goes, whenever those are on the site, he goes, I cringe a little bit. I'm half tempted to submit this one just to see what he would put in his Doug notes, you
Right,
know.
right.
But I want to go look and see what they've done in the past. But honestly, it's all known stuff. And a lot of it I'm not afraid to do myself. You know, the console was all janky and nasty, and so I found a replacement piece, but it came unfinished. So I bought the rubberized, spray paint, and finished it. It came out really nice, and I'm like tearing the whole interior apart because there's YouTube videos. Because it's not hard. I think literally like 6 screws, and that
Mhm.
whole center console comes apart.
They were
And
talking
I'm not
about that
afraid
also
to.
with the dashboard to pull the cluster out to send it in.
Yeah.
It's like it looks intimidating because you're taking the top of the dash off, but it's like, would you say 6 or 8 Torx bolts? And it's like,
Yeah, well, and I mean, in that car, they're front and center. I mean, other than there's on the sides, there's some that are hidden by the vents, but the rest of them are literally just right in front of you. You know, because it's got sort of that rugged appearance. So they just put the bolts right there on the top of the dash cover. So that's not intimidating in that car. I mean, it would be more intimidating in your 5 Series, for example,
oh
because
God.
that's stuff is buried under places and things, and
Yeah.
but the Range Rover is fun to work on. The Jaguar, the X300 6 cylinder I had, and the reason I was tempted to buy the 6 cylinder XJR, I really enjoyed working on that. That car, I had to replace the radio, and literally, I think it was 2 or 4 screws, and that whole center console comes apart. The radio comes out. You push it through. I mean, it's strangely a little bit sort of cobbled together when you're looking at it, going, really, this is the whole way they did this, but it works. And again, it's fun to do. I wouldn't know where to even start taking apart that E450.
Right.
And yeah, part of it is everything's hidden, but there's so many panels that soft close and stuff like that. It's not just take your trim tool and go, "Kah."
Right.
There's a lot more finesse, a lot more, and that's part of why I'm sure these cars have gotten so expensive just across the board. So even lower end cars, Kias and things have that same sort of level of, I don't want to mess with it.
Right.
And part of that's, I'm sure, my age. Will there be a YouTube video on that wagon at some point? Well, I guess it depends on whether they stay on the streets because they end up being reliable in the long term or not. You know what? I can find videos all day long for 210 wagons and 211 wagons.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think ultimately the answer is that E450 is a disposable car because with the hybrid system and all that, that somebody will figure out how to take that engine minus
Hmm.
all the other stuff and cram it in a 190E.
Yeah.
But the rest of it will wind up in a in a scrap recycling
In
beach
a Coke can.
in southern India, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
where things go to get recycled. I mean, that's the sad reality of it.
Yeah, no, I think that's largely true, and it's kind of a shame, Again, you go back to that word sweet spot. Why is it a sweet spot? It's a sweet spot because it's not. I mean, there are some intimidating things about the Range Rover. Don't get me wrong, but as on a whole, the workshop manual tells me how to do most everything. It really comes down to my willingness, my personal ability, mechanical or whatever ability, and the availability of the parts.
Mhm.
I've mentioned to you that the steering column adjusts up and down just fine, although once you do it, it starts acting weird and you have to pop the fuse. But in and out doesn't work. And that happens on those cars, but you have to basically replace the whole freaking steering column. And there's a video. I watched the video and I thought, I don't care that much. It's not at a place that's uncomfortable to me, so I'm not gonna go there. At least not now. And if
I
I
wonder if in other markets, and the cars might have been too fancy by the time they got to the 322 series. I wonder if in other markets there are mechanical steering columns.
like manual adjustable.
Yeah, manual
Yeah.
adjustment.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I would speculate, but that by the time they got to those cars, it was all pretty much let the internet be your friend, right?
I know.
Um,
Steering column.
they are Fun though. So what happens while he's looking for that? If you adjust the steering wheel up and down, so once you have it where you want it, you don't mess with it, because if you do, the next time you get in the car and turn the key, the steering wheel goes all the way down, and then it doesn't want to go back up until you pop the fuse, put the fuse back in, or restart the car after a few minutes, whatever. Then you can adjust it back to where it was. But popping the fuse seems to sort of level everything, and then it's fine, and it doesn't
Is
do
that
it.
the only thing that fuse does?
No, no, it,
Hmm.
it actually operates the driver's seat too. Otherwise, I would just leave the fuse out, and I did that for a while. But then I realized that once you get it adjusted to the right place and don't mess with it, it's fine. And it even does like the move out of the way thing when you open the door.
Hmm.
Like so, it's allowed to move the steering wheel, but I'm not.
I feel like I would just sort of get into the steering column and unplug the
It's
switch.
way in there.
Hmm.
And again, sort of,
Just unplug the switch so nobody messes with it by accident.
yeah. So you know how those switches can have sort of long wiring looms on them that go into the recesses of. I mean, I guess you could cut the wires, but I don't know what else the switch might be connected to that
I
would
would cut the
offend.
wires.
I mean, that seems sort
Cutting
of
wires on
extreme.
your late model British car. What a good idea.
Exactly. Hence why I'm okay with adjusting the steering wheel to where I want it. Nobody else drives the thing. So, anyway. But it really is a pleasure to drive. Trust me.
Right, right.
I'm not
70%
even trying
of
to
the
sell it.
time, 70% of the time, the car works 100% of the time.
But yeah, but that's that zone. I mean, I think for me, starting in the late '80s or even the mid '80s with some of the E28, 123, 126 type cars, that's my sweet spot through about 2006.
Yeah, yeah, with a few exceptions for
Sure.
cars that were designed and built starting in oh 04, oh 05, oh 06 through maybe, 10, 11, 12, right?
Yeah.
Like they made 322s through 2012. They made X350s through I think the same.
Yeah.
And but all those cars were previous generation technology,
Yeah.
right? Like buying a 2015 something that was designed in the late oh 09, 2010, probably not as good a bet.
I mean, I would still buy a high mileage Mercedes E320 CDI, with the inline six diesel.
Mm-hmm.
'05 or '06, those are the only years for that car here in the States. It's such a good car.
Hmm.
And, the styling is a little dated. So is the styling on this SL. I mean, they have the round headlights and stuff. That's sort of, an old school or an old look for Mercedes cars. I like it. And behind the wheel of that car is a nice place to be.
Hmm.
And you can get the equipment you want. And if you want to upgrade the stereo to CarPlay or whatever, there are aftermarket solutions that fit in there and look more or less factory. You know, they say they're plug and play. I haven't tried to install one. So, I mean, that was one of the cars I thought about buying. And really, what kept me from really pursuing them right now is I've had a few of them. And I
Hmm.
wanted to get something that was on my bucket list that I hadn't had before. And, or at least not in that iteration.
Not in that form factor. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but I would go back to that well in a heartbeat if I
Mhm.
needed or wanted.
Well, a 211 is on my short list for whatever comes after the 530.
Yeah.
Right, there's a handful of cars. I wouldn't call it bucket list. It's, what's the next reasonable daily driver still from that era, right?
Mm, mhm.
The E39, X350, 211, even 210s now, the E-Class before the 211, they feel a little old
They
compared to
do. And
yeah,
finding one that,
as a daily, and where I live, they rust.
well, I was
So
going to say, finding
it'd be,
one that's
it'd be a
not rusty.
shame.
Yeah.
Um, but that whole era of car. And not surprisingly, my sweet spot is the same as yours. My E30 is a 40-year-old car,
Mm.
a 50-year-old, no, it's a 40-year-old
Or
car,
40,
40-year-old car. And most of the time, other than the fact it's fairly worn out, it still drives like a relatively modern car, right? It's got fuel injection, it's got power brakes, it doesn't have ABS, but it's an old car. But like it does modern car things well enough to drive around town.
Sure.
Um, whereas, you know, at the time, my 50-year-old BMW didn't, right? There's a big jump between, I mean, give or take 10 years, but, 72 to 82, 75 to 85, like there's a bigger jump there.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking as you were talking. So I still have the 94 Mazda Miata. And, my first car that I've shared before was a 77 Alpha Spider. And when I started driving, it was 87. So that car was 10 years old. And to me, at that time, it seemed like an old car.
Mhm.
And admittedly, I mean, Alpha Spiders were already 10 years old or 11 years old when that car was new. So, I mean, the body or the style was not was already, you know, had been around for a long time. But but that Alpha felt like an old car in 1987, and certainly hasn't improved with age from that standpoint. I get in the Mazda. It's got a digital display. It's got electronic ignition. It fires right up. Right now, it has a little issue that I'm trying to sort with whitish bluish smoke. That I put a new PCV valve in it last night. We'll see how that
Yeah.
plays. That's the optimistic solution, but the old valve seemed to do what it was supposed to. So I don't know how optimistic I still am.
Yeah.
But
Well,
we'll see.
but
But
that's a mechanical issue.
but I digress. Yes,
But
but I get in that
the
car.
point being, like, that is a solvable mechanical issue. That is not an engine control module from, however many years ago or too modern that doesn't exist anymore.
Right. But the point that I was trying to make is I get in that car now and fire it up, whatever, and it's 31 years old
Mhm.
and it still feels contemporary. Part of that is I'm old. Part of that is the car is just better
Mhm.
than, those old convertibles from, the 70s and 60s, what have you. And it's very interesting to me, just that perspective that,
Yeah.
you know, an NA Miata, and to younger people, I'm sure it's an old car,
All right.
because, and of course with all the stigmas that attach, although they still make a Miata, right? So if you say Miata to anybody that knows anything about cars, whether they're 10 years old or 80 years old, they at least have in their mind a picture of a two-seat sports car. You say Alfa Romeo, and half the people go, "What's that?" But that's a different issue.
Although I will tell you, going back to the Miata thing, I work with a person, and some of you out there know my day job is working in the automotive advertising world. One of my colleagues did refer to the Miata when we were talking about competitors as the Miata. And yeah, yeah. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
To
MX-5 to that person.
to quote the maitre d' in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I weep for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Now, to be fair, that person has not done it again, but yeah,
that's a
anyway,
conversation stopper right there.
right? Didn't mean to fully Amtrak your train of thought there, but
That's okay. That's
that's
okay.
okay.
That's
But you're right. Like the Miata is an old car that doesn't act like an old car. The Z3 is coming up on 30 years old next
yeah,
year.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
97. And that car is based on technology to some degree from the early 80s, right? I mean, that car's half E30,
Right, right.
and that car doesn't feel like an old car
No, to us
to
and
us.
and to our contemporaries.
Right.
But show me the roster of 2026 cars available right now, and how many of those am I gonna 30 years from now, if I were still
Assuming something.
if I were still in a position to say anything, what would I be sort of nostalgic or interested in having from right now? And there ain't a lot.
I mean, based on new cars or newer cars, as you say, in the last, current to 3 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a handful of cars I think are interesting now. Even in 20 years, I'm going to be nostalgic for them, which is different. And the answer is I have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think there will always be cars like the Porsche 911s and things like that that people are enthusiastic about take care of, and and some of them, especially interestingly, the higher spec models that have less crap in them,
mm,
are likely to still be supported because they occupy a special space in the corporate and the enthusiast place, the car company and the enthusiast community. But beyond those, you know, I don't lust after any Ferraris since they stopped putting gated shifters in them.
mhm.
I don't. I mean, if I want to go super fast, I don't know. I'll get a Tesla. I mean, I won't, but you know,
I mean, go lease a Hyundai Ioniq 5N,
yeah.
right? Like
It's
that car
so
will be faster than anything you've ever been in,
right,
right?
right, and so like I don't need a supercar. I mean, I don't need a supercar anyway. I think that's not something on my bucket list of
Mhm.
cars. I would be interested in some point in tinkering with something like a Ferrari Mondial, just because they're reasonable. In the Ferrari world, they're old tech and they're reasonably affordable in
Mhm.
that space. But having known somebody that had one who, basically, really got familiar with his repair shop,
Yeah.
because of all the different things that were just fail points on them, I'm not super interested in that sort of thing. I would still love a Bentley Turbo R.
Mhm.
And you can buy the nicest one of those in the world for. I mean, well, you could buy a very nice one for less than 30 grand. You can
Right.
buy an okay one for 15.
Yeah.
But that's a car that I fear, and I think you get that. It would make the Range Rover look like, a Camry.
Right. Well, and I think because those, all of those Rolls and Bentleys from that era they appear to be simple cars, but they're not simple cars, right? And parts prices are
Yeah,
ridiculous. I mean, even you know, the the enthusiast DIY friendly parts houses, the parts are still outrageous.
right.
And they go downhill very quickly. We were just reading an article that um, yeah, they're fine if you keep on top of them, but keeping on top of them is like a second or third job,
Mm.
right? So I fear those cars in a way. I have a healthy respect for things like L322s. I think I have a genuine fear of Bentleys and Rolls Royces.
Well, and the media, the automotive media, is sort of reaffirming that you should.
Yeah.
As you read and watch videos, I mean, unless you've got tremendous resources like some of these YouTubers or old school journalists or folks that came from big family money to just, hand a credit card to the Rolls Royce Bentley specialist and say, make it right.
Mm.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the challenge, going back to sweet spot again, is my sweet spot, I think, is evolving a little bit because there are cars sort of in the middle of my sweet spot that I pretty much have written off. I love Mercedes 140 S classes.
Hmm.
I think they're awesome cars. They're falling down in terms of some of the availability of crucial components. And it's happening with 126s too, but on the older cars, a lot of that stuff is rebuildable, relatively easy, and there are people doing it. Where I think in sort of the 140 space, a lot of them, you look around, ridden hard, put away wet. I mean, do an Auto Tempest search
Hmm.
for S classes of that vintage, and you'll see a lot of doggy cars. And then a really nice one people want 30 or 40 grand for, and and actually some of those aren't even really that nice when you start looking at where they're unraveling. And so even though that's sort of my, it's sort of to your earlier point, like on the 210 Mercedes, those are rapidly becoming very old cars. You know,
Yeah.
it's 30 something years old. A Miata from 1994 is a simple creature.
Hmm.
A Mercedes S500 or S600 from 1994 is
Not
not.
so simple. Not so
You know,
simple.
now put that up against a Bentley Turbo R. Maybe I lean Mercedes 600 just because Mercedes. I'm more comfortable in Mercedes space, if nothing else.
Right. Well, I think there's less propensity for that Mercedes to break in catastrophic ways. And we're talking the far end of the spectrum, right? We're not
Sure,
talking like Camry versus Rolls-Royce. It's like at that very far end of the spectrum, like the S-Class is here and the British car is here.
sure.
Um, uh,
But I mean, of all those cars, give me a Jag X300
right.
because it's still more hands-on friendly. They had seat heaters, but they didn't have all those switches with the bladders and stuff, and they didn't have hydropneumatic suspensions and all that like the Rolls and the Mercedes, the high-end 140 Mercedes had, and things like that. All those systems are expensive and
Mhm.
they break. They age out. They have seals in them that go bad. The lines rust. I mean, just whatever happens.
Mhm.
And in the Rolls and Bentley, it's all tied into the brake system.
Oh yeah.
And so ooh, double bad situation when that craps itself.
Yep.
Uh,
I think you're right to have written those cars off. Um,
it irritates me because I'll still search for them and think, damn, that's a nice car,
yeah,
and think, no, no,
it's
no,
not.
no,
It's
no.
not.
It
The
is. It's
nicest
a
the,
very nice car,
it's
but
not.
not to
See,
own.
right. See, that's the siren song, right? Like this is a beautiful car to own. It's not. You think it
No,
is, but it
it's a great car for you to own.
right, right. And you meaning the viewers out there, whoever's watching this, not me, you, or you, but the proverbial you.
Right. Well, and you see these YouTubers that buy janky old cars from that era and take them to the shop and get $20,000 repair bills. I don't want to be that guy.
Right. Our YouTube channel isn't going to pay for that.
I can't afford to be that guy, and frankly, I don't want the hassle. Like I like tinkering. I don't mind taking my cars to the shop periodically. I mean, my wife pointed out the other day that I sold my most reliable vehicle
Yeah.
in favor of keeping the Range Rover. Stellar move. Which one do I like driving more? All day long, this one.
Right.
I mean, the reason I sold the Tacoma was it sat outside my house doing nothing.
Mhm.
Just eating up insurance money and money I could spend on repairing the Range Rover.
Right. I
So,
think I think I think that's a solid enthusiast move, though. Selling your reliable Japanese car to fund repairs on your Ranger.
I like to think so.
That's a life lesson right there. I don't know if it's a good life lesson, but it's a life lesson.
I believe the term is cautionary tale, but anyway.
Whatever. We quibble over terms, but perhaps. Um,
But yeah,
you know,
but
my definition of sweet spot has also evolved a bit in that with technology and the internet and resto modding and the availability of just more things, I think in my head that some of the older cars that may have fallen out of our sweet spot uh, could be back on the sweet spot, right?
like, what do you mean?
So, for example, we were talking about, 70s BMWs that you get out of smelling like gas and or exhaust, right? Fuel injection can fix that,
Yeah,
whether it's later BMW fuel injection or standalone or whatever. One of the things on my E30, even though it is a full Euro car, it has a catalytic. And of all the federalization stuff that I removed from that car, door bars, marker lights, plugs that didn't do anything, I kept the catalytic. You know why? I hate smelling like car exhaust. I
well, that
hate it.
was the reason that I got that 500 SEC as reasonably as I did was the guy that imported it from Germany, and it was a no cat car,
Yeah.
didn't like that the exhaust was stinky.
Yeah.
And I never had an issue with it in that car. But I also am somewhat desensitized. The engine burned as clean as those engines are going to burn. It just didn't smell as non
Awesome.
gassy as a catalytic car, a US spec car. But yeah, to your point, I mean, there's I mean, we've been watching this E3 BMW on Bring a Trailer. That's a little bit of a I think it would be a fun project for somebody.
Right.
But it's
Well,
got that
and it
manifold.
will be, right? Like it's actually selling for some money
No,
now.
I saw that. I saw that.
Because for the first 4 days, it had literally zero bids. And it's like, and I told my wife about it. I said, I'm going to throw $300 at it. She's like, where is it? I'm like, somewhere in New York. She's like, so this is like 1,500 or 2 grand by the time you get it home. I'm like, I mean, nominally.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed this morning it was up to $1,100.
Yeah, yeah.
But my point on that is it's got a manifold for a single carb where those all had dual carbs, or is that the
Oh,
other one?
that was that one? Or was it the
That
Manila?
might have been the other one.
The Manila one.
That might have been that one. Anyway, what I was thinking about was, you've got these Holly kits now. I mean, fuel injection kits. It would be fascinating to see what that car is like with the fuel injection kit, even like the generic, Holly kit thrown on it to see what it does. It'd be really an interesting project and experiment in, to the point I think you were making, or part of the point you were making is, can some of these old cars sort of come back into the fold with what's available now?
Right, right. And the Reader's Digest version for the folks at home, the BMW, the old BMW M30 Big Sixes in other markets, specifically Europe, you could get a four-barrel manifold. It was some goofy Solex four-barrel you don't want, but with a little bit of finessing, you can put a Carter or a Holly or an Edelbrock carburetor on it. Well, from there, Reed's point is you can take the next step to I think Holly's system is called the Sniper, and it's a standalone fuel injection system. So that engine with the mechanical distributor and ignition system, but the fuel injection could be really interesting.
And a lot of that's less intimidating than, mega squirt systems were 20 years ago.
Right.
A lot of it is, again, there's a good knowledge base. People have done it to all kinds of different cars, and I mean, you take that E3, you put fuel injection on it, you put modern brakes on it. It's going to come down to, are you working with a good base motor, and you upgrade the suspension and all that, and then it's going to come down to being a cosmetic project.
Right.
Are the bones good? And do you want to do what you need to do to make it a car that you want to spend time in? It's still going to drive like an old car because it's, the steering wheel's going to be way up here. It's going to be huge. Even if you put a small steering wheel in, it's at a weird angle. It's got a short dashboard and a low cowl and a big greenhouse and all that. It's going to make it feel like an old car in that way. But I think about Bill Arnold doing Frankenbav. I was actually reading about that when I was commenting on that one auction, and I went back to look that up, and there's a lot of ways you can make those neat cars, but they're still fundamentally old cars.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Frank and Bev, speaking of somebody who was there and wrenched on, is like, yeah, once you get into replacing subframes and suspension and putting ABS in it and ultimately a steering rack. I
Hmm.
mean, that's a lot more fabrication work.
Yeah.
If you can live with the suspension that's in it, shocks and springs make a big difference.
Right.
You're still gonna have a steering box. The brakes are fine. If they're fresh, they're fine. Those cars stop well. But yeah, no, I think that's true. And I think that sort of can translate to other cars, right? You were talking about bucket list cars. I've always loved the Jensen Interceptor Coupe,
Mm.
goofy car, right? Big glass bubble rear hatch, but they were really they were of the era where you had these pretty and or handsome European cars with big American V8s in them.
Mm,
In the case of the Interceptor, it was a 383 or 440 Chryslers, with a torque flight behind it, right?
right.
Some of them had manuals, very few of them had manuals, but most of them had a 727 torque flight behind them. And they're cruisers, but they're also like old carbureted V8s.
Yeah.
The suspensions weren't particularly rudimentary. They were good suspensions. But again, that's a car with modern brake technology, fuel injection. It's still a neat place to be because it's a very 60s, 70s British interior. Um, but I think you could drive that car. Because
And there are guys that in the UK that sell a lot of upgrade parts for them, modernization parts.
Right. If you have all the money, you can spend, three, four, $500,000 on a resto mod, but I don't think you have to go that
No,
far.
I don't think I'd go that far. But even like again, if you wanted to upgrade brakes or engine management and stuff like that, I mean that stuff's out there. Again, with the engine management, I mean it's Mopar, and that's I mean pull up any Mopar website
Yeah.
and that has upgrades. There's plenty of stuff available that could make that car even more livable as a daily driver. I mean, your worst issue with it's going to get 12 miles to the gallon
If you're lucky.
if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Um,
But what's interesting is I don't know how the interior components are, but if you look at a lot of the engine pictures out there, what's sitting on the front of that engine? A giant Chrysler AC compressor.
yeah.
They have air conditioning,
Yep.
right?
Yep. And air conditioning from those days was not bad
No,
on
no,
American
Chrysler
cars.
AC was great. I mean, was it GM AC? I don't know, but all the American AC systems worked well. So I
Yeah,
mean,
I
I
mean,
think
going back to the '60s, those
yeah,
were
I mean, anything's
cryogenic
fine.
and fairly reliable. I mean, and again, all the parts for that stuff is still available. I mean, that's when you talk about bucket list, there's not a lot from the '60s and '70s. I have a lot of interest in, but I still want an A-body GM car,
Mhm.
and I really kind of want the Pontiac because of the nostalgia factor, since my folks had one, and I love the big chrome beak.
Mm.
And again, there are those thick catalogs from whoever it is, National Parts Depot or whatever.
Year
Um,
one.
huh?
Year one, I think is what.
Yeah, that I mean that is a car you could build from the catalog
Mhm.
if you needed to. I don't want to buy a restoration project, but I don't need a garage queen either. I just want to bomb around in it. That might be an itch that I could scratch in a day or a week. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
My wife doesn't have any great affinity for '70s muscle type cars that make burbling engine noises, but that's a childhood trauma or a teenage trauma that she suffered at the wheel of a '74 Dodge Monaco.
Mhm.
So, I don't know that I'd ever get her past that. So that may not be an itch that I ever end up scratching, but that's a car, and again, reliable to the extent that a Chevy small block 350 is reliable, because I'm not going to go find the hopped up GTO and pay the premium for that. I
No.
just I just want the 350. I
Yeah.
I wanted it in automatic. I wanted to have a console and air conditioning.
Mhm.
Maybe convertible, maybe coupe. I don't know. Um,
I think the coupes are good looking cars, but I think if you're going to the effort, do the convertible. It
Probably.
is sort of funny because we do look at those cars uh from time to time, and you can make anything out of the catalog, right? If it doesn't have AC, you can put AC in it. If it
Sure.
doesn't have a console, you can put a console and bucket seats in it. But finding the combination as it sits already of those options, whether it's a 350, a 400, whatever,
Yeah.
with an automatic, with a console, with AC, that isn't, that still has floors, that'd be
Right.
good, right? That isn't triple white or whatever. You want, ideally, you'd like some colors. Um, Admittedly, I haven't really been looking that hard, but they're not as prevalent as you think. It's like, oh, that's
No.
a really nice one. Ooh, it's a four speeder. It's got a console. No AC.
Or it's 80 grand because that's what somebody's decided it's worth, whether it is or not.
Right.
I mean, that's the other challenge is for cars of that vintage. I think that the enthusiast base is slowly diminishing. But the folks that have nice ones still, or even decent ones, still want to capitalize on what muscle cars were doing 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
At Barrett Jackson, selling GTOs for $180,000 that were not special cars.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that's not where they are now. I mean, and even worse, look at, the early 60s cars, the 50s cars, the 40s cars. Unless you're looking at a 30 whatever Bentley blower,
Right.
or something that's special in that way, or a Packard, or
Duesenberg.
Duesenberg, yeah,
Yeah.
stuff like that. The more esoteric cars. I mean, I really like both first and second generation Continentals,
Mhm.
and I mean the first ones are a little bit homely, but I think they're neat. And the second one, I think, is a very large European looking car.
Right.
And the prices on both of those have come down dramatically. There's still the holdouts. There's the people. Oh, this car won a. I saw an ad in Hemmings in the current issue for a Mark II Continental, and it had won a show in 1990.
Right. Right.
Well,
I'll
a
capitalize on
lot
that.
happened in the last 36 years.
Right.
Even if that car sat in the garage, it aged in a different way.
Right.
So
Right.
you know, I I'm interested. There may be, I don't know that it's a bucket list thing, but it may be an opportunity if you like some of those cars
Mhm.
to get them that would have been out of reach when we were somewhat younger.
Mhm.
But before we age out of, the ability to drive a silly old car with a three on the tree. And, I mean, you're going to get out of that smelling like gasoline for any number of reasons, but it might be a fun toy for a little while. Again, I always go back to scratching itches. I have a lot of automotive itches to scratch.
Should get that looked at.
And with that, I
Right.
think we call it a day.
I think we're done. All right.
All right. Y'all take it easy.
See you on the next one.
Bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, bum, bum.